Next on Federal News Today, entering the international stage after almost 2 decades on the terrorist watch list. The North African country of Libya says it's open for business. We'll take a closer look at that country's transformation and the challenges that lay ahead. Next. It was a historic moment this month when the United Nations Security Council elected Libya to be its newest non-permanent member. The vote was a culminating event in a struggle that's continued over decades, and it came just over a year after the U.S. restored diplomatic ties with the African country. The activists say the struggle for legitimacy isn't over yet. Joining me now here in the studio is Randa Fahmy-Udom, president and founder of Fahmy-Udom International. And Randa, thank you very much for being here today.
Nice to be here, Beverly.
Libya is the first country to move from the terrorist watch list to the UN Security Council. How did that happen?
Well, certainly it was years and years of diplomacy involving many countries around the world, but primarily the United Kingdom and the United States. Very instrumental in helping Libya move from a terrorist nation to where they are now, which, as you mentioned, is a member of the UN Security Council, which is quite an achievement.
The U.S. and Libya made a deal for it to voluntarily give up its weapons of mass destruction. People will remember that. Muammar Gaddafi remains in power.
That's right.
Why wasn't there a regime change?
Right. Well, it was part of the negotiations. I mean, clearly over the years, Libya had become aware that their isolation was not forwarding their goals within the country. And so they sat down initially with the Brits and then with the United States to first negotiate the terms of Pan Am 103, which many of your viewers may remember was the tragic downing, Pan Am 103 in the late 80s. Libya took responsibility for that, compensated the victims, and then moved forward after that into deciding to give up the weapons of mass destruction. But through those negotiations, part of that was that the United States and Great Britain would not push for regime change, and therefore Muammar Gaddafi, who came to rule Libya through a 1969 coup, remains in power today.
And you mentioned Pan Am 103. There are 3 remaining lawsuits dealing with Pan Am 103 and the disco bombing. How has Libya handled compensating its victims, and did it ever admit involvement?
Well, it's interesting. It's quite a precedent for Libya. Libya really is the first terrorist nation to voluntarily compensate financially the victims of the acts. Libya never formally took responsibility, I would say, for the acts and admitted the act in Pan Am 103. But what they did decide to do was step forward and financially compensate the families of Pan Am 103. The agreement was for $10 million per family. Each family thus far has been compensated $8 million, and the remaining $2 million in compensation that remains is what the subject of the legal dispute is today. There also remains 2 other lawsuits, the Libya disco bombing, in which an American serviceman was tragically killed in that as well, and also there's an Egypt Air lawsuit against the Libyans as well. But keep in mind that Libya really is the first country to voluntarily step forward and compensate these victims. Iran, on the other hand, another country on our terrorist list, had to have its assets frozen and seized, and some victims of Iranian terrorism have been compensated through frozen assets, not through the agreement of the Iranian government.
Pressing ahead and looking forward, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice is expected to visit Libya at some point, and whenever she does that, she'll be the first U.S. Secretary of State since John Foster Dulles to go to Libya. Does this signal a major shift in U.S.-Libyan relations?
Oh, it's tremendous. Certainly, I think the Libyans are welcoming Secretary Rice when she does visit. Many had hoped she would be there this month, in fact, now for the Sudan conference that is going on in Libya. But Secretary Rice is very busy right now with the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. In fact, she's going back to the region to talk to the parties about coming to Annapolis for a conference sometime in November and December. As a result, that really is taking a great deal of her time. I think she does hope to get to Libya within the next few months, and it would be a tremendous signal to the rest of the world that the United States and Libya are now not only normalizing their relations, but moving their relations forward on the diplomatic front.
And one thing that I heard you speak a few months back, and you said that Libya is open for business and open to the West, the United States in particular, but that U.S. companies really haven't gone there
Right.
seeking investment.
Right. Libya has decided, it has announced $40 billion to invest in their infrastructure. Keep in mind, Libya has been under sanctions for 20 years and not much has been built over those 20 years. Libya is now certainly open for business and very much wants U.S. companies to come and not only invest but help them rebuild their countries. There are a tremendous amount of requests for proposals out there, and certainly Saif Gaddafi, Colonel Gaddafi's son, who's been charged with rebuilding the country itself, has put a tremendous amount of effort into attracting U.S. companies, and I'm certainly trying to educate U.S. companies about the opportunities that are in Libya, which are tremendous.
All right. Rhonda Fama-Udom, thank you for being here tonight. A very interesting topic and one I'm sure we'll hear more about in the coming months. Thank you.
You're welcome.